I am trying to make a case here between sins and aggregates, and survival instincts, the instincts that motivate us to preserve our lives in order to continue the species. Hence, I'm trying to make a point that spiritual master and philosophers were simply teaching us how to become a civilized society when sins, in the case of the Judeo-Christianity and aggregates in the cases of Buddhism, are, somehow, eradicated from society. I believe that those teachings are persuading us to observe or watch the negative spin of survival instincts, advising us to keep them in observance to avoid falling into the so-called sins or aggregates. So we can argue that sins or aggregates are survival instincts in a state of degeneration. There are about 700 years of difference between the apparition of Judeo-Christianity and Buddhism and the first words being spoken on survival instincts. I believe it is time to call it out. And reaffirm that sins or aggregates are survival instincts in a state of degeneration. And that those same survival instincts when used in a virtuous mode will result in a peaceful society, which is after all a healthy way of living in order to flourish as a species. The greater philosophers of all of time and the spiritual masters came to teach us how to deal with survival instincts once at all. The instinct of feeding that motivates us to eat, at which point it may become gluttony. Are instincts and sins constantly uneasy? There is a beautifully created space, time between being instinctively animal or not. Instincts are here to stay to preserve us from extinction, although uncontrolled instinctual behaviors can exterminate us all. Then, it is fair to assume that the 7 capital sins are survival instincts in a state of involution? It's fair to inquire and pretend an answer to the following question. Are the greatest philosophers of all of time and spiritual masters trying to teach us how to deal with the degeneration of survival instincts? Sex is beautiful as the arousal feelings that the act instills. It is as magic we want to add to it, otherwise, is an animal act. Being human in the good sense of it, it is a balancing act between our primordial basic needs for survival, and an expected positive outcomes that this balancing act entails. So, when the survival instinct of procreation to preserve the species through sex becomes lust? It is lust and the survival instinct of procreation to preserve the species an inseparable union that needs to be redeemed? Then, it's fair to inquire and pretend an answer to the following question. Are the greatest philosophers of all of time and spiritual masters trying to teach us how to deal with the degeneration of survival instincts? Regarding anger, we have to use it, not abuse it. Anger destroys. It is indisputable, anger is in us like we are in it. It is embedded in ourselves, and, but not less, anger is a sin or aggregate and a survival instinct at the same time. The instinctive, natural way to express anger is to respond aggressively. Anger is a natural, adaptive response to threats. It inspires powerful, often aggressive, feelings and behaviors, which allow us to fight and to defend ourselves when we are attacked. Heroines and heroes are those people who are able to manage a balancing act between the demands of their survival instincts, and the positive outcomes expected by moral courage. Whoever fails to do so, will be in sin with the biblical way, or being affected by aggregates as in Buddhism. Survival instincts are as natural as the sun and the moon, although a natural instinct that has fallen unsupervised will spin in unnatural directions, crashing us all together. Is fair to say then, spiritual masters and the greater philosophers of all times have come to teach us how to master these survival instincts once at all. As when we are born into the dominions of the reptilian brain, the same will happen when aging. Gracious are those who age above the dominion of the reptilian brain subjugation. Greed was a justified behavior of our ancestors. We need a greedy attitude to get and keep food supplies and safe shelter for us and our loved ones in order to not die, or survive. Keeping our loved ones and ourselves nourished and safe from the elements was an instinct embedded in us. The urge to possess material things was motivated by basic instincts of self-preservation. After all, without those indispensable elements, we would simply die. So, we could say that, for lack of a better word, there are two types of greed, one that acts in a balanced way and another that does not. When you hoard things in such a way that it negatively affects the life of one, or several people, the act becomes a sin, as the Bible calls it, or aggregate as Buddhism calls it. I also understand that if the act of someone's hoarding does not affect any person, still that particular someone would have to be psychologically analyzed. Is fair to say then, spiritual masters and the great philosophers of all times have come to teach us how to master these survival instincts once at all. If human beings have survived as a species because we have evolved the capacities to care for those in need and to cooperate, through generosity, caring, and compassion, then envy goes against it, since it is diametrically opposite to those healthy attributes. Is envy the most selfish survival instinct, since it compels the envier to possess what the envied have? This is another example where the sin-envy intertwines with another survival instinct called social instinct. The opposite virtue to envy is fraternal charity. The charitable rejoice in the success of others without regard to themselves. Envy goes against of the social instincts that promote a civilized society, hence it goes against peace and prosperity. Philosophers, theologians, poets, novelists, and other commentators on human nature have all added their voices to the chorus of envy detractors. Then, it's fair to inquire and pretend an answer to the following question. Are the greatest philosophers of all of time and spiritual masters trying to teach us how to deal with the degeneration of survival instincts? Are they telling us how to manage them in order to stop once at all being pushed by our darkest inner animal side? Our ancestors exerted so much energy hunting and gathering that they sought rest whenever they could. We are predisposed to want to conserve energy. Expending unnecessary energy would have made them more vulnerable to predators or environmental factors. Procrastination and laziness are based in our genetics. This battle in the mind comes courtesy of our ancestors who aimed to do less to increase the likelihood they would survive. When there are sloth, there is no energy, no vigorous, no calm, no energy to be mindful of the reality which appears now. If procrastination and laziness are based on our genetics, then we need to observe them so it does not become sloth. We need to use our downtime wisely, not allowing it to spiral down uncontrollably. There is a beautifully created space, time between being instinctively animal or not. Instincts are here to stay to preserve us from extinction, although uncontrolled instinctual behaviors can exterminate us all. Being human in the good sense of it, it is a balancing act between our primordial basic needs for survival, and an expected positive outcomes that this balancing act entails. Is fair to say then, spiritual masters and the greater philosophers of all times have come to teach us how to master these survival instincts once at all. While authentic pride is associated with more positive personality traits than the hubristic type, both emotions must have provided some survival benefit for our ancient ancestors. Pride is an evolved emotion, but it's a little bit more indirectly related to survival. To the extent that it allows us to survive, it does that by helping us maintain our social relationships with others, sort of maintain our place in the social hierarchy. In the distant past, while a display of genuine self-esteem might have signaled a person's altruistic behavior, hubris might have been a social shortcut, a way to trick others into paying one respect. If they couldn't attain respect the old-fashioned way, the scientists suggest, our ancestors figured out how to act accomplished. Because it proved to be so beneficial to the survival of our ancestors, they argue, pride is built into our species biology. It increases an individual's self-esteem, which in turn increases that individual's status in the eyes of others. Having that status increases the likelihood that the local community will help you withstand hardships. Although, pride has a negative side to it, as when any other survival instinct when it gets somehow intertwined with the pleasurable effect coming from the flesh. If we see pride among people who have no idea about Dharma, it is understandable. However, if afflictive emotions and haughtiness are present among Dharma practitioners, it is great disgrace to practice. Pride is called a poison, because it is the basis for disrespecting others and for creating suffering in our lives. It's defined as an exaggerated positive evaluation of self. Generally, we don't call it a poison, unless it is the basis of devaluing another person. In other words, if you're equally proud of all beings or all people around you, equality being an important word, and the foundation of Ratnasambhava's wisdom, then, it's not an issue. Spiritual masters and the great philosophers of all times have come to teach us how to master these survival instincts once at all. Religion plays a significant role in shaping cultures, values, and social structures in different societies. It influences cultural practices, provides moral guidance, and contributes to the organization of communities. Sins and aggregates are the consequences of survival instincts in a deplorable state of being. It is understandable then to see the involution of survival instincts as the real root of human malice. It will be interesting to see an entirely new human discipline from a survival instincts perspective. What I meant is that survival instincts are the manifestation of nature in ourselves. There are instincts and everything else, and we ourselves, the human family, are the only animals on Earth that can be aware of the existence of survival instincts. There are negative ones as sins or aggregates, and positive ones as virtuous. It is up to us to choose a side.